the 15th Legiones Astartes, the Thousand Sons. Betrayal is a child of many sires. Power, hate, vengeance, shame, guilt, bitterness, viciousness, callousness, all have played their part in the fall of those who turned on the Emperor. But to this list, two more must be added: hubris and blindness. While other legions walked into infamy at their own choosing, the Thousand Sons were plunged into that state. First, by their own pride. Second, by the treachery of those who they trusted. And third, by the Imperium itself. The Thousand Sons were a Space Marine legion bound up with occult lore, mysticism, and the otherworldly powers of the Psyker. It was these esoteric arts of war that made it one of the most formidable legions, but also one of the most distrusted, and it would eventually see it subject to the Emperor's judgment. Tainted by mutation and touched by the warp, the fall of the Thousand Sons seemed certain in retrospect, but that certainty is false. Another path might have waited for the 15th Legion, had fate not been so cruel. As it is, the story of the Thousand Sons is one not of darkness, but of a light that drew a legion and Primarch higher and higher, until they could no longer see the boundaries of obedience left far below them. The 15th was among the last in line of the creation of the Legiones Astartes. The conquest of Terra was already complete. Luna had fallen, and the firstborn legions had started to bring the rest of the Sol system to heel. It was a time of transition, a time of endings as well as beginnings. And into this time, the 15th Legion were born. Strange portents and ill omens surrounded the creation of the Legion. Its aspirants would be free from flaw, drawn from the Archaemenid Empire, the enclaves of the Fire Lords of Aos, and the Kashai domain on Terra, realms known for the stability and ancient purity of their bloodlines. In the first years of the Great Crusade, the reputation and strength of the Legion grew at an accelerated pace. It reaped multiple victories, and often fought alongside brother legionaries, being held high in esteem by even the savage 6th and iconoclasts of the 17th Legions. A decade after the Great Crusade spilled beyond Sol, the first of the Thousand Sons began to openly manifest potent psychic abilities. These, it is thought, were the results of an aberration in their gene seed, which heightened psychic ability and unlocked even latent sensitivities to the warp. These abilities would further shape the Legion, giving rise to some of its most notable warriors, but also introducing instability and mutation into its ranks in the form of the so-called flesh change. This horrific and fatally degenerative mutation was triggered by loss of control while channeling psychic power, and afflicted the Legion in great numbers until its rising strength of tens of thousands was reduced to a mere 1,000 legionaries. The flesh change was a closely guarded secret of the Thousand Sons, and though mutation was far from uncommon in the galaxy, its link to the rising psychic powers of the Legion did not go unnoticed. The condemnations and calls for the Legion to be expunged for its impurity grew in intensity and strength as the Thousand Sons withered. Fate, however, had different plans for the Legion. In remaking the Legion, Magnus created the Prosperine cults. Each cult specialized in a single strand of psychic power, and every psyker of manifest power within the Legion belonged to a cult which mirrored their foremost ability. The Pavoni concerned themselves with the interactions of the etheric and living flesh. Biomancers, they were flesh shapers and remakers, and their initiates could channel the powers of the warp to harden their flesh against damage, boil the blood of their enemies, and even to heal the flesh and bones of their own bodies. Deeply connected to the process of life, the Pavoni were often said to hold the heart and the passions of the Legion, and in matters of doctrine, oratory, and belief, their adepts often dominated. The Raptora were masters of bending physical reality to their will, employing psychokinesis to control fundamental forces such as gravity. They could conjure shields of invisible energy, crush metal with their minds, and summon storms of debris to flay their foes. Many of the Raptora were also amongst the Legion's most gifted theoreticians and scholars, noted for the coldness and cleanliness of their reasoning and their logic. The Corvidae were soothsayers and augurs who bent their abilities to touch the flow of time and consequence. Perhaps the most subtle of all the cults, it was said by their fellows that the Corvidae could read the past in a dying man's breath, could glimpse far distant possibilities, and even manipulate the flow of one second to another by the force of their minds alone. The mark of the Corvidae was also the mark of the Legion's greatest strategists and generals, and it is no coincidence that Ahriman, chief librarian of the Thousand Sons, and foremost of its leaders, at the dawning of the Horus Heresy, was Magister Templii of the Corvidae. The Athanian secrets were bound to the workings and manipulations of the mind and thought. Both subtle and powerful telepaths, they held the Legion together in battle, channeling orders and intent seamlessly into the minds of its warriors, forming a communications network unbreakable and unparalleled in scope. Because of this, it often seemed not an army of individuals, but of machines driven by a single indomitable will. Outside the clamor of battle, many of this cult were given to asceticism and withdrawn contemplation. consequence of their contract with the thoughts of others, perhaps. They were often also used as emissaries to other legions and factions of the wider Imperium. The Pyre's abilities expressed themselves in a terrifying manner. The control and creation of fire. Their thoughts could become hellstorms, burning as bright as a star's fury, and their touch could reduce metal to slag in mere moments. Most bellicose of all the cults, the Pyre excelled in destruction, and their smoldering pride beat with the heat of the Legion's martial heart. As well as relying on their formidable psychic gifts, the Legion was still a thoroughly drilled and trained body of Space Marine warriors, possessing the finest equipment and armored support, and excelling in almost every aspect of conventional warfare. When combined with their etheric ability, the Legion was a terrifying weapon indeed. In addition to the core structures of the Legion, there were orders which existed both within and beyond its circumference. Known by the symbol of a poised serpent, the Order of Ruin were a sect of mystics said to be obsessed with numerology and the hidden structure of the universe. The Order of the Jackal had a presence in every other structure and faction of the Thousand Sons, including the other orders. The role of this small order was twofold: to remember the dead and to raise the next generation of warriors for the Legion. It is only by extrapolation and the interpretation of scraps of intelligence that the wider Imperium knows of the existence of the Third Order, the Order of Blindness. Thought to have been headed by Magnus's equerry and former tutor, Amun, the so-called Hidden Ones appear to have been an order of infiltrators, spies, interrogators, and scouts deployed to gather intelligence. After the use of psychic powers by the Legion was forbidden by the Edict of Nicaea, Magnus and his 1,000 sons withdrew to their home world, ostensibly chastised by the Emperor. There, Magnus, via psychic means, discerned the danger Horus posed to the Emperor and to the fledgling Imperium, and tried to warn the master of mankind. As events transpired, the warning failed, and only contributed to the War Master exploiting the opportunity of the Space Wolves' censure of Magnus the Red to eliminate a rival in the 1,000 Sons. The Legion's future would be defined by the cataclysmic battle for Prospero. The Legion's homeworld of Prospero was a polished jewel glittering alone in the long dark of night. While many worlds which had cradled the lost Primarchs, it seemed, were often unremittingly soaked in darkness, cruelty, and blood, Prospero had achieved an ascendancy over such barbarity. This was the place where the Primarch Magnus the Red came to settle, within Tizca, the City of Light, and Citadel of Reason on Prospero. There, he absorbed the lessons of the city's masters, and soon exceeded their skill in every area of psychic discipline, scholarship, and endeavor. Tizca flowered as never before under Magnus, the Crimson King of its empire of dreams. Magnus was the tallest of the Primarch siblings, a giant with a reddish skin and possessing only one eye. He was erudite and considered in his manner and rhetoric, earning a reputation for wisdom among his brothers. He was also an extremely potent psyker, second only to the Emperor in power. Magnus reunited with his legion at the critical moment as it was overcome by the flesh change. Only his vast intellect and power as a psyker allowed him to save his legion from certain doom. He turned all of his power, lore, and learning to discovering a way to lift the curse which was killing his sons. And though he was successful, his cure came at a great cost, and the legion was forever changed by his hand. The 16th Legiones Astartes, the Sons of Horus. The Sons of Horus were made by fate the scions of heresy, the sons of the arch-traitor, and alongside their sire, first in infamy, and their name would resound as a curse throughout the scattered and war-torn realms of humanity. Such is their crime that it is easy now to forget that the past was very different. And once they and their master were lauded above all the warriors of the Legiones Astartes and favored in the Emperor's sight. Born as the 16th Legiones Astartes on Terra, they would rise to greatness as the Luna Wolves and fall into the abyss as the angels of ancient myth bearing the name of their Primarch. Before those dark days, they fought at the Emperor's side on Terra and throughout the early Great Crusade. They were as stalwart and indefatigable as any, their actions serving to exemplify all that it was to be a warrior of the Legiones Astartes. Brutal, ruthless, and unwavering, but also honorable, and once loyal beyond question. Their history is the history of the ambition of the Imperium itself, and the flaws that broke its dreams of unification and glory asunder. Much of the 16th Legion's early intake was drawn from the hunter clans of Terra's Jutagran Ball and the Samsatian subplate slums. Perpetual conflict and the harshness of life on the desolate margins had given these people the hard edge of ruthlessness and independence. And this character lay at the heart of the nascent legion. Ever they sought to be first in glory, and struck with brutal finality before any other could lay claim to their kill. It was said of the 16th Legion that it was unleashed to begin and end wars its enemies did not yet know they were fighting. The first pacification of Luna at the very onset of the Great Crusade was perhaps the most famous of the Legion's early victories, and it was from here it earned its first name. For the Selenite clans were so shaken by their onslaught that they pleaded for the Emperor to call off his wolves. The Legion's tally of victories would only swell, and its culture would rapidly evolve with the rediscovery of their Primarch on the planet Chthoniya early in the Great Crusade. The first of the foundling Primarchs to be reunited with his Legion, Horus took total command with an easy confidence, molding the Legion to his own vision. The Luna Wolves under Horus won many lauded victories during years of ceaseless conflict, but one would eclipse all others. On Olenor, the Imperium broke the greatest Orkoid empire in known existence, called by some the last true threat to humanity's domination of the galaxy. Here, Horus slew the overlord Urlak Urg with his own hand, and was proclaimed War Master for his deeds by the Emperor. In honor of Horus and his conquests, the 16th would no longer be the Luna Wolves. Their armor would be readorned in the cold green of a sea in storm. In place of the crescent moon and wolf's head, a single unblinking reptilian eye would stare from their pauldrons. Reborn, the sons of Horus had risen with their father to an unrivaled height, recognized without exception as the first in glory amongst all of the Legiones Astartes. As the personal legion of the War Master, the 16th Legion was rarely absent from the forefront of the fighting, and its doctrines and tactics reflected this method of warfare. It excelled at the application of precise force against a specific weakness, its warriors favoring close-range fire saturation and landing the killing blow on a downed, outnumbered foe, a tactic drawn from the brutal gang traditions of their adopted world, Chthoniya. To facilitate this means of warfare, Horus preferred to avoid numerous layers of fixed organization. Instead of a formal structure, he would group companies and individual units together as required for the execution of a particular campaign. The commander of such a formation would usually be a senior captain. If the formation was especially large, then other captains would take on the role of lieutenants to the overall commander until the completion of the campaign. These formations rarely had formal titles, but the Sons of Horus commonly referred to formations intended to prosecute a rapid assault as spear tips. In eschewing formality and fixed structure above the basic level of the company, Horus demonstrated his pragmatism and his preference for waging war with judged precision. Within the Sons of Horus Legion, squads commonly had their own honorific or epithetic titles, rather than simple numeration. Illuminators Prime, Deathmakers, Jerox Reavers, the First Sons, and similar, while some were named for the sergeant or chieftain that led them, where their leader's own reputation was strong enough alone. Many of these titles betrayed the culture of Chthonian gang honors, the tradition of reputation and internecine warfare. This had, over the years, grown steadily stronger within the rank and file of the Legion's intake. One avatar of this increasing influence was the late reemergence of Chthonian gang sigils graven into a particular Space Marine's armor, recording notable kills and deeds, as well as to which company they belonged. A practice which accelerated rapidly after the Legion had transitioned into its identity as the Sons of Horus. This transition marked not so much a new open brutality in the Legion, but a factor that had always been there and had become more visible as the Legion's panoply finally began to shrug off much of the influence of ancient Terra. In the final days of the Great Crusade, the white of the Luna Wolves turned sea green, then darkened further to a murky green-black, as the Sons of Horus further cast off the disciplined Terran traditions of warfare and heraldry, and erred in pride and growling malice towards the dark heart of Chthonian and its traditions of gang fiefdom, blood pride, and merciless, incessant conflict. The Sons of Horus have also been documented as the first Legion to foster warrior lodges, those most secret societies of like-minded battle brothers. Though they venerated no god or occult principle, the ritual and secret elements of the warrior lodges did not fit with the ruthless rationality of the imperial truth. Frowned upon but tolerated, the lodges persisted and flourished. They survived in part because many saw them as relatively harmless, and in part because they promoted fellowship within and between legions. It was a misjudgment that would have consequences that few could imagine, as they were corrupted by dark powers to act against the interests of the Imperium. Ultimately, it would be the Sons of Horus and their Primarch which tore the galaxy asunder. Once a world of riches colonized in the lost past, Chthonian had been gutted over thousands of years and left a hollowed-out carcass. Death came easily, and its people were grim and savage as a result. But from this barbaric world would rise the greatest general the galaxy would ever witness, Horus Lupercal. Contradiction and omission tarnishes all accounts of Horus's formative years. For every grain of truth as to his origins, there are a dozen legends and myths, the great leader himself only adding to the tally. It is believed he was the first of the Primarchs to be found, and spent long years alone with the Emperor before his father's attentions were split between his Primarch brothers. One thing remains without question, and that is that both before and after the War Master's fall from the light, he remained a superlative leader, master tactician, and peerless orator, the like of which the galaxy had not seen before, nor has borne witness to since. Many say he was second only to the Emperor himself in charisma and will. As War Master, Horus was a peerless diplomat in general. able to convince any of his brother Primarchs to the justness of a cause for which he desired their legions. To mortals, he was a demigod whose majesty alone cowed Lord Marshals, though he was never accused of abusing his own majesty, instead always debating strategy in equal and open discourse and respecting the views of those around him. Always, Horus would be seen in good humor, surrounded by his brother Primarchs and Imperialis Auxilia advisors. It was the great tragedy of the age. The Emperor's favored son would fall to darkness and treachery. The spark that gave fire to the rebellion in Horus's heart must remain a mystery which can never be perceived by mortals. Only those who were there, that saw and heard all, may know, and they are lost. What is known is that during the time after he became War Master, Horus fell grievously ill while quelling a rebellion on the moons of Davin, and was taken by his warriors to one of the Davinite warrior lodges. What transpired within the walls of that place is unknown. All that can be said with any certainty is that from the moment of his stepping from the Serpent Lodge on Davin, Horus trod the path of heresy. The 17th Legiones Astartes, the Word-Bearers. If there is a hierarchy of treachery, then the Word-Bearers sit in its highest circle. Once the most devoted and rigorous of warriors, it was not enough that they fell, but they pulled their brother legions into the abyss with them. While the treachery of others came like a storm, or the final flowering of a long-buried seed, the Word-Bearers' betrayal was poison distilled over long years. From their founding, their devotion to the Imperium and the Great Crusade was beyond question. They were the bearers of the ideals of the Imperium, of its vision for the future of humanity. Their loyalty was never questioned, only the form of their devotion. But now, their loyalty can never be seen as anything other than a mask, and that their fanaticism is a flaw which would undermine all they once sought to build. Once they were bringers of light to the benighted realms of humanity, but during the Horus Heresy, they brought only the poison darkness of old night, seeking to dominate and bind the demons of the warp. They marched alongside denizens of the abyss and rendered eternal damnation to any who dared to oppose them. From its earliest days, the 17th stood apart from its brother legions in both duty and outlook. While all the Legiones Astartes fought with utter devotion, the warriors of the 17th carried with them an air of zealotry. Recruited from the sons of exterminated foes, they were trained and raised to know the crimes of their forebears and the price of mercy both. While others went to war with righteousness in their hearts, the 17th fought with the cold fury that only the at once condemned and redeemed can truly know. While other legions acquired names later in their history, the 17th were named as the Imperial Heralds at their founding. That one amongst 20 should be singled out might imply some special favor. But in truth, it was a title that spoke not to special honor, but to the Legion's place in the Emperor's purpose. Where enemies stood against the Emperor because of their belief in gods or superstitions of old night, it would fall to the 17th to deliver the Emperor's ultimatum: recant or be destroyed. Once they had conquered, the Imperial Heralds would seek out works which spoke of the power of sorcery, false gods, and irrationality. They emptied libraries, dividing the contents into truth and falsity. Idols and the trappings of worship would be cast down and pulled from temples and shrines. It was a pattern they repeated across ancient Terra, earning themselves a second name. Few spoke of the 17th as the Imperial Heralds. To their brother legions and the peoples of the newborn Imperium, they were the Iconoclasts. The Legion followed much of the structure of the Legiones Astartes during its earliest incarnation. Warriors belonged to squads, squads to companies, and companies to chapters. This functional hierarchy remained largely unchanged from when the Legion was the Imperial Heralds until the revelation of its treachery on Istvan V. The rediscovery of its Primarch and the influx of recruits from Colchis did little to change the Legion's basic structure. Rather, it added layers of organization. This additional layer was concerned not with the composition of units on the battlefield, but with the ideology of those units. Companies were grouped together in chapters of between 500 and 3,000 warriors. Each chapter bore a name and sigil based on the constellations of Colchis: the serrated sun, the Osseous throne, the crescent moon, the weeping hand, the coiled lash, the exalted gate, the twisting rune, the Scold's bridle, the knight's chalice. Each were found within the Legion's ranks. These large formations were often the building blocks of word-bearers' campaigns. Most crusade fleets consisted of at least one full chapter, and the largest several. Outside of these chapters were elite formations such as the Ashen Circle, the truest iconoclasts of the Legion, charged with the shattering of religious edifices, the slaughtering of false prophets, and the burning of any book that did not acknowledge the Emperor above all others. Lorgar was both commander and spiritual father to his Legion. The hierarchy of authority within the Legion reflected this dual nature, divided between the military and the spiritual, between mind and heart. On the one hand, the Legion followed simple and robust lines of authority. A chapter master led each chapter, a captain each company, and a sergeant each squad. It was common for a chapter master to designate one of the captains as sub-commander to act as his lieutenant. The second line of authority in the chapter was spiritual. The chaplains, although nominally attached to companies and chapters, in reality were a brotherhood unto themselves. While each was a warrior, their concerns were not for the business of direct command, but for the strength of their brothers' spirits, for the clarity of their purpose, and the purity of their actions. Each chaplain fitted into his own hierarchy, with ascending tiers of knowledge and respect. High chaplains were the ruling circle of their kind, and at their center was the first chaplain. The word-bearers were also well known for the vassal war bands and half-feral fanatics of mortal warriors who accompanied them. Though they themselves were fanatically devoted to the Legion, such forces were treated as largely expendable. These were unleashed on world after world, and yet their number never depleted, showing that behind the word-bearers stood millions more willing to die at their command. Half a century before the outbreak of the Horus Heresy, the word-bearers were the first legionaries to embrace the powers of the warp, employing singular units such as Galv or Back. This was a title that, over time, came to refer to any of the word-bearers who were possessed by the powers of the warp. But those who later bore the title were a lesser breed of abomination compared to the first of the Legion's brethren who sealed their pact with darkness. The Galv or Back were the first of their kind, space marines and demons fused into a single being. After the word-bearers revealed their true nature at Istvan V, the crimson of the Galv or Back spread to the rest of the Legion in fits and starts, and new Galv or Back walked with them, and the secrets of their demonic warriors were spread to several other traitor legions by the Legion's diabolists. Irrespective of their power or pedigree, there had been no greater defilement of the Emperor's work in creating the Space Marines than these loathsome creatures. The priests and diabolists of the word-bearers would remain at Horus's side throughout the galactic civil war, whispering in his ear as the architects of his damnation. The word-bearers were a curse upon the galaxy in the Age of Darkness, spreading across the stars seeking ritual and portent, or else unleashing the warp as part of their pact with the Dark Gods. Few loyal Imperial heralds yet existed to oppose their Primarch, for in seeking his primordial truth, Lorgar had long since purged his legion of those who still worshipped the Emperor. Colchis was a world of old gods. It is said that religion was in the air, in the touch of the sun and the taste of the dust that hung in the air. To its people, worship of higher powers was as much a part of them as the beating of their hearts and the crying of their children. Bound in feudal traditions, it had once been a world of technology, but those days lay forgotten in old night. When the infant Lorgar fell from the sky of Colchis, his legion had yet to be born on Terra, and the faith of Colchis was held in the hand of a priesthood called the Covenant. Raised amongst this priestly caste, Lorgar would grow to become one of its number. In time, he turned on those who had raised him, leading a crusade to destroy them in the name not of the old gods, but of one god, a god of gold and light who spoke to him in his dreams. When the Emperor reached Colchis, there could be no doubt in Lorgar's mind that he knelt before his god. Lorgar soon converted his legion to his belief in the Emperor's divinity, using the nature of the Great Crusade itself. Across countless fronts, the Legion fought, suffered casualties, and recruited anew. As this attrition mixed the old with the new, Lorgar's sons accepted what was taught to them, because it was the only truth offered. In the case of those on Colchis, the belief in the divine was ingrained into every thought from birth. And when all was done, when the final Imperial Herald had embraced the faith, when the last of the old iconoclasts had died, then Lorgar added the final flourish of ritual to seal his victory. The Imperial Heralds would become the word-bearers. To the rest of the Imperium, still ignorant of the change wrought in the 17th, the name reflected their part in bringing the Imperial truth to all of humanity. To Lorgar, it was an affirmation of his purpose, to give humanity faith in the God at its pinnacle.